down. I'm going down. You're not around, baby.
Time on my hands. Since you've been away, boy, I ain't got no plans. And the sound of the rain against my window pane is slowly driving me insane. It appears that when Mary wrote this song, she was missing somebody. She was dealing with a real separation. She was dealing with loss and absence. Sleep don't come easy. Boy, please believe me. Since you've been gone, some of y'all are testifying with your words. Now, I want to make it very clear for my few moments, I'm not going to preach about the separation of you and your boo. But there's nothing like feeling the absence of a loving God. Even in your worst of situations, if I just know God is there, I can make it through. But how many of you know if you ever experience the absence of God, I must be all by myself. And so theologically, we know that God is unlike anything we know or experience. He is infinite. He's not subject to space and time. As a matter of fact, the word teaches us that he is omnipresent. The omnipresence of God means that there's no place in creation where God does not exist. And if you thought about that for a little while, it might take you a few moments to even wrap your mind around that concept. See, you and I can only be one place at one time. And as a matter of fact, there are some places we cannot be. But God alone can be at all places at all times. He transcends the limitations of space and is present in all places at all times. Some folks picture God as far away, as living in heaven, and occasionally comes down to the world and does a miracle here and there. But those of us that come to understand Scripture understand that God is not far away. He's right there. He's right there, and he's right here at the same time. Our God, the God of love, the God of grace, the God of mercy, is always near, is always close, is always right with us. God's presence is like the air we breathe. It is odorless, tasteless, and invisible, so sometimes it goes unnoticed, but how many of you know it's right there? God's presence is all around us, but Mother Sadie, if it's ever withdrawn from us, how can we live? how can we make it? We'll be writing songs just like Mary J. if we ever experience the absence of God's presence. In our passage today, we hear the psalmist David declare that God is omnipresent. The psalmist first takes the thought into his own heart, then flies with it into the farthest reaches of the universe, then into the darkest places of being, and he discovers, Dr. Guest, that God is everywhere. The psalmist came to the conclusion that nothing can hide us from God. Nothing can escape his presence. So there are three things I want to emphasize and get to you, and then I'm going to take my seat. Are you still with me? First thing I want you to understand real clear is that death cannot hide us from God. David declares that there is nowhere that we can hide from God. Wherever you go, the presence of God will be right there. Right there in Psalm 139:7, he says, "Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence?" Or one translation says, "Where can I flee from your face?" The theme here is an omnipresent God. The psalmist does not want us to go or flee from God or even to avoid the presence of the Almighty. So he asks this hypothetical question to set forth the fact that none of us can escape the presence of God. You can't hide from the sight of God. You can't hide from the presence of God. It's a constant. We cannot be removed. So when David says, "Where can I flee from your presence?" the answer is nowhere. Tell somebody, nowhere. God is everywhere. The presence and the manifestation of the presence are not the same thing. When Jacob was in the wilderness, he said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not." God dwells with his creation and is everywhere, invisibly present among all of us. He is there. The sense of God's presence has to do with our personal relationship. See, whether or not you feel God's presence depends on your closeness with him. There are times, even in your own home, people can be there and you don't feel close to them. Y'all talk back to me. And that has to do with personal relationship. But God is always there. Do me a favor and help me preach this message and tell somebody, say, God is always there. Barriers may have disappeared, and you have a deeper understanding of that relationship, and you can develop that relationship with God. But God is always there. Listen, let me see if I can press my point. You remember the story of Jonah. The prophet Jonah found out the hard way that you cannot outrun God. In chapter 1 of that book, Jonah was commissioned by God to preach to a place called Nineveh. Somebody say Nineveh. And he was supposed to go to Nineveh and tell them how wicked they were and how much they had messed up and how much sinning they had done. And Jonah didn't like his mission because he knew that if he goes and preached to them, that they would want to repent and God was going to be merciful to them. So he didn't want to go to Nineveh, and these people were his mortal enemies. And so Jonah didn't want any part of God's redemptive work. So he literally tried to flee the presence of God. He ran from God, got on a ship, went down, and like most people in those times, Jonah did not believe in the omnipresence of God. He believed that God was localized and tied to a certain land and to a certain place. And so instead of going to Nineveh, Jonah books a passage on a boat going in the opposite direction. And so now he's trying to get as far away from Nineveh as possible. And he finds out that God is everywhere at the same time. Jonah is headed to Tarshish, and he thought he had gotten afar off. And so he's breathing a sigh of relief, and he finds out that God drops him off in the middle of the ocean. I wish I had some Bible readers in here. He finds out that God was on the ship. He finds out that God was in the ocean, and he then finds out that God had commissioned a big fish to come pick him up and place him where he wanted him to be in the first place. I wish from that you would understand that God is everywhere at the same time. Tell somebody on your road, you can't outrun God. You can't outrun God. You cannot outrun God. Jonah learned the hard way that he could not outrun God. So David in this text continues to enumerate hypothetical avenues of escape from the all-pervading presence of an omnipresent God. He says in verse 8, if I ascend to heaven, you are there. He then says, if I make my bed in hell, you are there. David addresses that no matter where we go, if we go to the farthest corners of the universe, even to the remotest parts of the world, God is right there. It isn't that God gets there ahead of us. It's that he was always there. It's not like he's behind. It's that he was always there. It's not like he catches up to our plans. God is always there. David, by heaven, means the upper region of the world. By Sheol, by hell, he means the lower parts of the world, the grave, the abode of the dead. He is saying, no matter where I go, distance does not separate me from God. And I need some people that through life and through some of the ups and downs of life, you can now testify in 2024, no matter where I've been, God was right there. I'm talking about there are some seasons of my life where I might be riding high. I might be on the mountaintop. I might have plenty of money. My relationship is doing well. I got a car. I got homes. I'm doing great. And I know God is there. But I need some people to testify that on my worst days, when I'm in the gutter, when I don't know nobody and don't nobody know me, I can testify God was there. I must be in the wrong place. I must be in a church full of perfect people. I need to preach to some people that'll help me testify. I have woke up in some places and wondered how I got there, but God was right there. I have spent some times in a bar where somebody's had to carry me out, but God was right there. I have been in some places that if you knew where I was, you might not sit next to me in church on a Sunday morning, but I can testify that even on my worst days, God was right there. Tell somebody, God was right there. Psalm 23:4 pushes my point. He says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For why? Thou art with me. God promises that he'll go with you through the difficult circumstances. He will be with you. The all-present God will be with you wherever life takes you. God sent me here to encourage somebody that may be going through a rough season, that God is right there. Do me a favor and encourage somebody on your road real quick and tell them, say, God is right there. Yes, death cannot hide us from God. But secondly, Brother Ray Sean, I want to submit that distance cannot hide us from God. In verse 9, the psalmist professed the fastest of flights to the most faraway places to flee from the scrutinizing presence of God. He says, if I take the wings of the dawn and I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, you are right there. You're right there. If I could fly with the swiftness and find a home thinking that you haven't been there, you already been there. If I go to the uncharted regions of space, if I find the farthest out point in the depths of the ocean, I cannot flee your presence because you are right there. I don't care what map you have. I don't care what kind of compass you're using. There is nowhere that you can go that can escape the presence of God. And I need somebody to understand, as you live your life, you make your daily decisions, as you plan your future, there is nowhere that you can go to escape the presence of God. The psalmist reminds us that if we follow God, if we follow God, sometimes it may take us off the map. Can I get a witness in this house? But God is everywhere. There are some places that man may not have discovered, but God can take you through. He can take you through the deepest valleys. He can take you through and over the highest mountains because he knows how to navigate it, because he's already been there. Verse 10 is a strong affirmation that wherever we may go, God is there to lead us and to hold us. Even there, thy hand will lead me, and thy right hand will lay hold of me. What a surprise. After you try to flee from God, you would expect God to be mad with you and reprimand you. But how many of you can help me celebrate that we have a loving God that's just waiting for you to get back on track? He's just waiting for you to show up. He's just waiting for you to do what he wanted you to do in the first place. That's why I always get so frustrated with people that may have strayed away from church and may have strayed away from God, and they say, Pastor, I don't want to be judged when I come back in that door. That's crazy, man. I don't know who you're going to be judged by, because God been waiting on you. God been waiting on you. He was waiting on you last month, and he was waiting on you last week. And if you worried about church folk judging you, you must be crazy, because if you knew what some of them had done, you stop worrying about people. Some of the people you worrying about done did what you did and worse. Please don't make me stay here too long because I'll come down your row. I'm telling you, if you were worried about hateful, sinful, wicked church folk, if you only knew what they had done, if you only knew where they had been, if you only knew what they had drank, if you only knew what they had smoked, if you only knew what bed they had laid in, baby, you would stop worrying about church folk and you would just come in here with your own problems, with your own situation, and declare, I'm just glad to be here. And can I get about 15 people to just jump to their feet and give God an undignified praise and say, I'm just glad to be here? Tell somebody in your section, I ain't got time to worry about your stuff. I got my own stuff to deal with. I ain't got time to worry about where you been. I'm still trying to recover from where I've been. I ain't got time to deal with your hangover. I got to drink my own Gatorade, take my own aspirin, deal with my own stuff. I ain't got time for your stuff. On your way to your seat, tell somebody, say, I got my own stuff to deal with. If somebody next to you didn't say that to you, find you another seat, because you're sitting next to somebody that's perpetrating. Find you another sinner in the building that's willing to be real and say, I got my own stuff to deal with. I ain't worried about your hang up. I got my own hang up. I ain't worried about your addiction. I got my own addiction. I ain't worried about your marriage. I got my own marriage. I ain't worried about your relationship. I got my own relationship. I ain't worried about your children. I got my own children. I said I got my own stuff to deal with. I ain't worried about your home. I got my own home to deal with. I ain't worried about your boyfriend, your girlfriend. I got my own stuff to deal with. I got enough stuff in my own seat. I'm going to deal with my own stuff. Put it in the atmosphere. Tell them, say, I'm going to deal with my own stuff. Listen, David says it like this. He said, God forgives the past. He controls the present, and he holds the future. Yeah, I want somebody to get that. Put that on social media. That'll bless somebody's day. Said he forgives the past. He controls the present, and he holds the future. Yeah, put your hand in God's hand. If the psalmist realizes that he cannot escape geographically the presence of God, then ultimately where we land up at, First Lady, is that God is always with us. So death cannot hide us from God. Distance cannot hide us from God. If you're trying to drive away from God, you're going to run out of gas. All right? But thirdly and finally, and I really will get out of here on this one, darkness cannot hide us from God. David is saying, no matter where you run, you're going to run into the Lord. There's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. In verses 11 through 12, the psalmist uses the figures of darkness and light to show how impossible it is to hide from God. And that's good news, because he goes on to say that God shines in darkness. I'm gonna say that over here on this side, because maybe that'll hit a little bit better. I think I pointed that in the wrong direction. Mike, I'll try it over here. You must understand that God shines in darkness. Let me go back there. Maybe that'll hit a little bit better. I said God shines in darkness. In your darkest night, in your darkest moment, in your darkest situation, that's when God does his best work. See, for darkness in Scripture, darkness oppresses people. Darkness is the absence of light. And it seems like in darkness, it's almost like it stops you. It pauses you. It hinders you. It shuts you down. But God does his best work in darkness. God shines the best in darkness. How do I want to do this? If you think about some of the places that sin has taken us, it's dark there, and it lands us in darkness. Are you with me? It's they do it on purpose. The club ain't right until it's dark. Please don't make me stay there too long. Don't. When the lights come on, it's time to go. But it's a situation when it's dark, when it's darkest. Everybody look better. Thank you, Deacon Janice. Everybody look better in a certain kind of light. But how many of you know that when them lights come on, sometime you'll be, man, I need to keep my glasses on in this place, because they looked a whole lot better last night. Y'all talk back to me here. Don't leave me by myself. And you make some of your worst decisions in darkness. But I also want to submit to you that if you keep your hand in the hand of an omnipresent God, that even on your darkest day, God can shine. Listen. As we're navigating life, as we're going through the vicissitudes of life, through the ups and downs of life, God has a way of shining in some of the worst seasons of life. See, the people of God should never be worried about what the world is going through. I hear that the economy is bad. What? I hear interest rates are up. You don't want to buy a car right now. You don't want to buy a home right now. None of it is good. And it is causing stress and anxiety in certain people. But how many of you know that if your hand is in God's hand, if your hand is in God's hand, God does his best work in the darkest situation. And I wish I had some people of faith in here that could help me testify to the world. I don't care how the world classifies this season. I'm going to keep my hand in God's hand. Do me a favor. Tell somebody in your row, tell somebody in your section, tell them, say, neighbor, it's dark out there, but I'm going to keep my hand in God's hand. That's the wrong neighbor, because maybe they're trying to navigate life with their flashlight. Maybe they think they can see their way through this. Find somebody else that knows that the only way they're going to make it is by keeping their hand in God's hand. And tell them, say, other neighbor, the only way we're going to make it is if God leads us. I need some old hymn writer to help me testify. He walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me that I am his own. I said, and the joy that we share can never compare. I said, none other has ever known. The only way we're going to make it is if we keep our hand in God's hand. You may be down. You may be depressed. You may be going through, but keep your hand in God's hand. I said, God does his best work in the darkest of situations. God does his best work in the gloomiest of situations. God does his best work when everybody else is depressed. God does his best work when everybody else is going through. I said, God does his best work when everybody else think they can't make it. Who am I preaching to in here on today that can help me testify? I'm gonna make it because my hand is in God's hand. I'm gonna make it because I'm trusting in God. I'm gonna make it because I believe that everything is gonna be all right. I believe that everything, tell somebody on your row, everything. I said everything. I said everything. I said everything is gonna be all right. Tell somebody it's gonna be all right. I said it's gonna be all right. Tell them, say, keep your hand in God's hand. Yeah. Nothing you can do, nowhere you can go can escape the presence of God. Yeah. In your darkest of nights, he's right there. In your loneliest of nights, he's right there. In your most depressed night, he's right there. In your sickest of nights, he's right there. At your worst doctor's appointment, he's right there. When you're crying more tears than you want to be honest about, he's right. You cannot escape an omnipresent God. Listen, tell somebody on your way to standing up, just tell somebody, encourage somebody one last time. Tell them, say, wherever you are, he's right there. He's right there. They needed to hear that. Yeah, wherever you are, he's right there. Wherever you've been, he was there. And wherever you're going, yeah, he's already there. Life can't take you somewhere that God ain't there. Somebody needs to understand a new job. God is already, he's already there. Old job, he's already there. Yeah, he's right there. No need to be fearful. No need to be scared.